You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Man, we are here once again, and man, today we are going to have a great show. We have a special guest. He's the founder and CEO of From Survivor to Thriver, LLC. His name is Erik DaRosa, and man, he is a podcaster himself. So man, this show is going to be amazing. So first and foremost, I just want to welcome you, Erik, to the show, man. Say, how you doing?
Hey, Shamaya, thank you so much for having me on. It's a very cold and snowy and beautiful day here in Somas Village, Colorado, and I couldn't think of a better way to spend the afternoon than being on your show.
Man, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for taking time talking to us today. So, man, you are the CEO of From Survivor to Thriver, LLC. It's all about, mental health. You're an advocate for that, and you're also a speaker, and you do a lot of things. So for the audience, kind of give us what inspired you to launch this podcast, because I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Sure. And thanks for allowing me the platform to be able to do that. So From Survivor to Thriver was launched 2 years ago this past week. It was born out of the pandemic. We all remember, I think, where we were around. For me, it was November, December of 2020, and I had just returned from a vacation and got back here to Colorado. Wasn't quite feeling myself, and realized that if I had the resources and the toolbox from my years and years and years of mental health therapy and work, and I was struggling, that I could only imagine what it was like for those people out there who were experiencing whether COVID anxiety, isolation, deepening of mental health issues that they might have already been experiencing. And so what I really wanted to do was I wanted to help people, just as though people had helped me in the past. And so with my co-host, Mark, we launched the podcast From Survivor to Thriver, which was all about shattering stigmas around mental health conversations, building community, and empowering voices. And here we are 2 years later, but my backstory was not always as someone who was so outspoken and so open about my own personal struggles. And so, in fact, for the first 33 years of my life, I was quite the opposite. I thought I was broken. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was different when I was in school. I didn't think I was like all the other kids. And I never spoke about it. I never shared it with anybody. I struggled in silence for 33 years with severe anxiety, OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And we can get into that a little bit if your audience hasn't heard about that before. And so it all stemmed from a lot of childhood emotional trauma, which I've now discovered in kind of the past 15 months of my own personal journey. But along with starting the podcast, I also speak very openly and candidly about my own mental health journey, because I feel as though nobody else should have to go through what I went through and suffer in silence, and that people should hear that there are people just like them out there who have gone through something similar, who are there to not only share their own stories, but to show that there's hope and there's help, and that there is, in fact, a way through. And so that's really where From Survivor to Thriver was born. And that's the message that we like to deliver to our audience today.
And it's something that is very needed. I just had someone on earlier today who kind of talked about mental health, and he called it brain health, and he had shared his personal story battling OCD. And I think it's a very needed conversation to be had, and also to help educate people, because people like yourself are the best ones to kind of help us understand, because a lot of times on the outside looking in, you just assuming things, but you don't really understand unless you actually had to battle that yourself.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. And that's, being able to share our own lived experience, not only to be able to help other people who might be struggling themselves, but as you said, to help educate people who, for many, let's call it fortunate reasons, have not had to deal with their own mental health issues. And in many ways, when I think about the comparison, uh, in our lifetime, almost each and every one of us is going to get some type of a cold or a flu, right? And so we all have that opportunity to experience what it's like. So when somebody says to me, "Oh, I had the flu over the past couple of weeks," right away in my own mind, I can say, "Oh yeah, I know what that's like. Probably felt really tired, fever, all the things that are associated with it." But when I start to tell somebody about, obsessive compulsive disorder and how I struggled with intrusive thoughts for, 3 decades, oftentimes, unless somebody has gone through that exact same thing, that same intrusive thought manifestation of obsessive compulsive disorder, they won't know what I'm talking about. And so for me, it's an opportunity to be able to share that with people. And so they can then not only better understand what I've experienced, but if there's somebody else in their own life who may come up to them and say, "You know what, I'm struggling. I don't really know why, but here's what I'm experiencing," then they might be able to say, "Oh yeah, I remember when I heard Erik talk about, OCD, and it kind of sounds like that. And I think we need to be able to get you some help." So it's for us, it's both. Yeah. Like you said, it's a storytelling platform and also in many ways an educational platform around all the different issues related to mental health and mental illnesses. And I'll call it trauma with both a big T and a little T.
You listen to Refocus Radio, talking to Erik DaRosa, and yeah, man, I think what you're doing is awesome. And when you interview all these different guests, right, they are sharing their unique perspective from their own personal experience. And you've been doing this for a while. I've seen your episodes. You have a ton of episodes that people can listen to right now today. So what are some of the common threads, you will, as far as your guests, of how they were able to get past that dark cloud and get that help that they need?
Sure. That's a really, really great question. And we're just about to launch episode 98 tomorrow morning. So we're only about 700 and some odd episodes behind you.
No worries.
But yeah, we're going to close quickly. But yeah, that's a really great question. And what I would say is, as we talk about on the show, each person's journey is like a fingerprint, right? No two mental health journeys are exactly the same, but there are some pieces and parts and common threads that we do see in all of them. And one of them that I've seen quite a bit and I talk about is how a lot of people really have their first recollection of whether it's some sort of a traumatic event or some type of a mental health related issue right around the age of 7. It seems to be a common number, a common age. Both, it was for me, it's for my co-host, and a lot of people we've had on the show. And although there may have been traumas or there may have been mental health issues going even further back than that, it's really the first memory that a lot of people have. The other thing I would say is a lot of people on our show, whether it's just from a mental health issue or if there's something that's also a greater piece of that, where substance abuse, addiction, what we're seeing happening in a lot of underserved communities where mental health issues are treatment is not accessible and it's not affordable. In the LGBTQ plus community, where we've been talking a lot about how when people are actually coming out, they might feel a little bit safer having their chosen family, but realistically in today's environment, from a physical standpoint, they're actually probably in a less safe place. And so when we look at all of those, individual stories, one of the common threads is a lot of people tend to hit rock bottom. There's a point in their journey where they realize enough is enough and something needs to change. And in many ways, that was not the intention behind the name of From Survivor to Thriver, but our guests really fit that name well, because for all of us who have gone through those struggles, at some point in our life, we are surviving. And each person's definition of surviving is different. But along the way, whether it's rock bottom, or as my co-host Mark likes to say, maybe it's some people are able to achieve a softer landing. That's when you make that transition from survivor to thriver. When you recognize something needs to change, you take charge and you begin that journey of healing step by step by step. And I would say that's probably the most common thread for everybody, is at some point they recognize, I no longer just want to be surviving, but I want to figure out how to thrive in my life.
And with that point, when we are living our lives, when you are productive, you have goals that you set out purposely. You don't just get up and be like, okay, whatever happens today happens. No,
Yep.
you get up, you either go to the job or you have your own business and you're working on your business stuff. You have these goals, but when you get in a funk, when the dark cloud comes, a lot of times it doesn't knock on the door and say, hey, you ready for me? Sometimes it just happens right then and there. And what I'm getting at is, how do you understand from your point of view, okay, this is what's really going on. Let me be realistic about this. This is where I'm at in this moment.
Sure. You bring up a really good point as well. And when I look back, I've been on the earth now for 51 years. And again, I can remember back to the age of 7. So for those, 44 years, when I look at some of my darkest periods or periods of, some of the most severe anxiety or debilitating OCD, it often came when I was least expecting it. It's very similar to, if when you're at your house and things are just kind of humming along really well, and suddenly there's a knock on the door that you're completely and totally not expecting. And it's somebody, from your past, that you haven't seen in about 15 years. And you thought you had kind of cast out of your life, and there they are. And that's really how, it's happened for me. But often I won't be the first one to spot it. And then that's also not very uncommon. For me, my wife, a couple of close friends who were very aware of my struggles once I became open and talked about it, they knew what some of those external signs and symptoms were. And they often would start to alert me before I even knew something was off. If I started to shut down, if I started to get irritable, if I really just started to keep to myself, if I didn't want to do things that were bringing me, my typical happiness, almost as though I was being, reclusive. So they would say to me, hey, how are you? How are you? How are you? Until I would finally, pick up on, I think they're not just asking me how am I doing, but they really want to know. And then I would check in with myself and I would recognize, yeah, things haven't really been that great for, the past 3, 4, 5 days. And then I would have a chance to speak openly about it. And I talk about a lot my healing team, and that's the team of people around me. It's my wife and friends and family members and therapists and Eastern medicine healers who are there to help support me along my journey, but I also know are not going to pass judgment and allow me to be vulnerable. And when things are not going well, they can help me reach in to my toolbox to ensure that I'm picking the right tool out for the right problem. So that's been for me also a very important part of being able to manage, my mental health journey.
And if you just join in, listen to Refocus Radio, talking to Erik DaRosa and about his awesome show that you need to go check out. You can get it anywhere you hear podcasts. Is From Survivor to Thriver. And when you make that point of that support system, say someone's listening right now and maybe they don't necessarily have a support system that they think is good enough for them to trust, if you will. At what point should an individual say, you know what, I need to go seek professional help?
Sure. And I will say that there are many people out there in that exact scenario that you're talking about. And sometimes walking into that therapist office or picking up the phone and making that phone call to a therapist or to a psychiatrist or to a social worker who you don't know can often be very challenging. But know that the person that is on the other end of that phone, who is on the other side of that email, is all about wanting to help you. They want to help you heal. They want to hear your story. Many of them, I can speak from experience, both from my own therapists, but also people who are therapists or who are professionals in the mental health space who we've had on our show. They often come into the work that they do because of their own personal trauma or because of their own mental health struggles. And so they too have that lived experience. And many of them also have that empathy and completely understand what it is that you're going through. And if for some reason you don't have, family or friends or loved one around you, and you don't feel comfortable making that phone call for the first time, on this show, and I've done it on our own show and other shows, and I'm sure Shemaiah will put in the links to be able to reach me, but I'm happy to be that resource. If you feel as though there's nobody that you can turn to or talk to, you can reach out to me directly, and I'm always happy to lend an ear and to listen, and more than happy to help connect you with the necessary resources in your own area.
Yeah, because I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you mentioned that you yourself have used that experience of using a source for professional help. Because I mean, even the most minor things in life, we want to be Superman or Superwoman. Oh, I can do plumbing. That's not that hard. Oh, I can, do this and do that. It's not that bad. But there comes a certain point where it's kind of out of our reach, and it's that time to say, you know what, I reached the limit of what I can do. It's time to wave the white flag and say, okay, I'm ready to get and receive some help.
Yep, you're so right. And I'll draw a bit of an analogy. I'm a ski instructor here in Colorado in the wintertime, and I'll be out, over 100 days a year with guests of mine. And sometimes I'll look around the mountain and I'll see people who I know are clearly out there for maybe the first, second, or third time. And I can see them, they're with a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or wife, or their partner. And I can see them struggling on the snow. I can see them wanting to really fall in love with the sport. I can see them wanting to really give it the best try possible, but they're just not able to stand up. And they're not able, once they stand up, they're not able to stop, and they're not able to turn. And I kind of want to just run up to them and say, just hire me for one day. And I promise not only will I get you skiing better, but I'll also be able to help you change that experience and change your life. And so it's the same when it comes to mental health. The professionals are there because, in fact, we can't do it alone. A lot of the hard work, once we begin seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever treatment modality it is that a person decides to take on for their journey, but there needs to be somebody there to help us along the way, and that's what the professionals are there for. And I've, between living in New York and living here in Colorado, I've spent my time with quite a few therapists and psychiatrists, and all of my experiences have been very positive. But I will also say that I think one of the roadblocks people run into is they will often end up with a therapist at some point along their journey, and something may not click, and they give up. And it's so important to recognize that there is a therapist and there is a professional out there for each and every person. It's very much like online dating. When you swipe, and I've been married for over 26 years, so I don't know the swipe right, swipe left, which is which. But when you swipe, when you swipe and you accept that meeting and you go on a date, sometimes that first date will work, sometimes it won't. But with just like with online dating, you get back in there and then you swipe again, you try again, and it's the same thing when it comes to getting professional help. There is somebody out there for everybody, I promise, and they do have your best interests at heart.
And man, before we let you go, a couple more questions. By the way, listen to I'm Focus Radio, talking to Erik DaRosa, the founder and CEO of From Survivor to Thriver LLC. You can listen to his podcast, From Survivor to Thriver. And what I want to say in the few moments we have left is you have created this space where people who may be dealing with certain things, whether it's depression or OCD or whatever it may be, they get to hear from other people, individuals who are going through or have been through it, and they're battling to just keep pressing forward and still be successful in life. I mean, what's the feedback from your guests? Because I'm sure it's almost like a village of like, man, it's like everyone is having an opportunity to say, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's been through this or going through this.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly that. And it's really a community, and we call it kind of our community of thrivers. And I'll give you an example of one guest who we had on. Her name is Teresa Wiggins, and she was on our show about 50 episodes ago. And when I first met her, we were doing a pre-call and we started chatting. And sure enough, both of us suffered from severe OCD. And then we recognized through, as we got more and more into the conversation, our manifestation of OCD was intrusive thoughts, which is not always the case with people. And then what we realized is not only were we the same age, but we both grew up in Massachusetts, and we grew up about 20 minutes away from each other.
Wow.
And so in that moment, both of us said to each other almost simultaneously, if I had only known that there was a little Teresa, and she said, if I had only known there was a little Erik 20 minutes away from me who was experiencing the exact same thing, it wouldn't have lessened the pain of what we were going through, but it would have made it easier to know that I wasn't the only one, and that I wasn't the only person who thought I was different. And so there have been many instances like that with guests on our show or audience members who have written into us and said, hey, I listened to such and such episode, and it had an impact on me because of this. And now I recognize that I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. And with a lot of guests we've had on, we've gone on to collaborate and do other things together, because we all feel as though, this is a community that we're building kind of, brick by brick, individual by individual, and that we're all working towards one common goal. And that's to shatter this stigma, and to empower voices for people who for so very long in their lives may not have even recognized they had a voice, or feel voiceless and powerless over whatever it is that they might be experiencing, so that they know there's somebody else out there that they can turn to if they are in fact struggling.
We've been talking to our guest for today, Erik DaRosa, and you can listen to his podcast. He is the CEO, founder of From Survivor to Thriver LLC. Man, time goes by fast, but real quick, you have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Bush Creek Thrivers. And tell us real quick, call to action for the audience, and a little bit about what you post on your Facebook page.
Sure. So the podcast, as you said, is From Survivor to Thriver, and new episodes come out every Tuesday. Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And yes, our Facebook page, Brush Creek Thrivers, it's from survivor to thriver. And it's really what we did with that is we wanted to create a very active community. And so not only is it a page where we post our weekly podcast episodes, but it's also an informational page. My wife is very involved with helping us with the page as well. And so we like to post information about current events that are taking place in the mental health space and research and some interesting articles or inspirational people that we may come across in our journeys. But we also want it to be a place where people feel like it's a community where they can contribute and share. So please give us a visit, give us a follow, send us a message, throw in a post, let us know what you think. If you want to be a guest on the show, if you have ideas for episodes, or if you just want to say, hey, I'm here as a resource and I'm really glad this exists, or I didn't even realize that these types of things were available. So we really just want to build that, as I said, that Thriver community, one person at a time.
Well, if you listen to this right now, you can go check him out on Facebook, and also he's on Instagram. Is Brush Creek Thrivers on Instagram. And last but not least, check out and listen to his podcast, From Survivor to Thriver. And just like any show, it helps when you leave a review on iTunes or really iTunes, because I'm sure he's on iTunes. So just give him a 5-star, if you will. And that really helps skyrocket talk show hosts to reach even more listeners, so that way they can obtain that valuable information as well. So, man, once again, talking to Erik DaRosa, want to say thanks for taking time you schedule talking to I Am Refocused Radio.
Thank you so much, Shemaiah, and thank you for the kind words and giving me the space to be able to share what we're doing.